My name is Bernard. I am the head of projects at the FIA, and it is a pleasure to be facilitating this session on artificial intelligence. So, as we know, AI is no longer just this futuristic concept. It is here, as we can see from the Read AIs joining the chat, and it is rapidly reshaping the financial services industry. So whether we do realize that or not, AI is already influencing how we work, how we engage with our clients, as well as make business decisions. The important part is with innovation comes responsibility, and that's why we are having this discussion today. So for today, we are going to be unpacking a little bit of AI, demystifying it, breaking down what it is and how it can be applied in your everyday business. We're also going to look at how you can use it to look after your clients and how you can leverage AI to do that, as well as, very importantly, some compliance and regulations around it and understanding the risks that artificial intelligence could hold. We do have an excellent lineup of speakers, as you would have seen from the invitation, that will be sharing their expertise on this. And just very quickly before we do get going, please make use of the Q&A functionality. If you have any questions for our presenters, we are going to try and get to all of those. Please keep it in the Q&A. You will see that your microphones and cameras will be off during these presentations. With that, let's get started. For this morning, I'm firstly going to hand over to our speaker, Rob Lansdale. He is the chairman of the Education and Training Exco, and Rob will lead the conversation on the FIA's career pathing document, which is an important initiative shaping the future of financial services. So, Rob, over to you, sir.
Morning. Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Bernard. On behalf of the FIA Training and Education Committee, a very warm welcome to you all, our members and visitors. This is our first webinar of 2025, and thank you very much to Sandra and your team for setting this all up for us. Also, a special thank you to our board members, Peter and Ronald. We really look forward to learning more about how we can incorporate AI in our practices in an ever-changing business environment where focus on IT has become an imperative. I've just been allocated a few minutes to ask our members for help with our career guidance project. The committee is developing a career guidance document that will be your go-to guide and the options available when planning a career in the financial services sector. We've distributed the first draft to the excos of all the FIA disciplines and would value any input to ensure that the document is practical, covers all the bases, and is simple to navigate. So the appeal is that you take some time to read through the draft and to provide us with input, either directly to the committee or via your branches. The current draft includes some of the following points: general regulatory requirements for a career as a financial advisor or broker, with a focus on the fit and proper requirements relating to competence, operational ability, financial soundness, and experience. The various license and financial product categories available to FSPs. Then a where to get started guide, which will include identifying potential financial advisors, learnerships and internships, and selecting an accredited training provider. We'll look at the functions of SAQA, INSETA, and the QCTO. SAQA being the South African Qualifications Authority. INSETA is the Insurance Sector Education and Training Authority. And the QCTO is the Quality Council on Trade and Occupations. And they are the authority for the new occupational qualifications that will replace the legacy qualifications you've become accustomed to in 2026. Then we'll have links to the accredited training providers, universities, and TVET colleges in South Africa. And we'll include the FSCA list of recognized qualifications. We'll look at funding options for qualifications and skills programs, including work-based experience programs, bursaries, and skills programs. And finally, some practice tips like remuneration structures for the apprentice financial advisor, ways to build a practice, and to retain clients. If you have any immediate suggestions, then please just drop us a message in the Q&A, Alternatively, engage with your FI structures, or you can call me or email me directly at rob@profinbrokers.co.za, or give me a call on 082 9200 206. The number's on the slide. Thanks very much for your time. We'll now, for the real business of the day, we'll hand over to Bernard. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rob. Really appreciate that. So just to reiterate, please do reach out to Rob as the chair of the Training and Education Exco. I'm lucky enough to sit on those excos, and Rob is definitely driving this specific work, very far. So Rob, yeah, thanks for the passion. I am always encouraged to have meetings with you as well. So I do encourage members to please reach out. I'm going to leave it quickly on the screen just for a few seconds. You'll see rob@profinbrokers.co.za. Please do reach out to him with feedback and a call to action. So thanks again, Rob. Right. Next, we are going to shift our focus to AI in practice. Our second speaker is Mr. Peter Olliott. He is a director of the FIA and is currently at Willis as well. We all know and love Mr. Peter Olliott, and he will be talking about demystifying AI, breaking down some misconceptions, explaining how AI works, and most importantly, showing how it can be applied in everyday use. Peter will also highlight how AI can enhance your client relationships, ensuring that technology is used to look after your clients rather than replace connection. Peter, the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you very much, Bernard. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen and others. My name is Peter Olliott. I'm representing the FIA today. At the outset, let me inform you that I'm not an AI expert. I'm a reasonable broker, I think, who happens to be very passionate about research and development, and in particular the role that technology can make our jobs easier, more interesting, and ultimately more meaningful for our clients. So with that, let's get started. So we start off with the beginning, which is, what is artificial intelligence? Sometimes one can determine the meaning of something by looking at the opposite of what it is. However, I can confirm, and I've checked with AI, that the opposite of artificial intelligence is not natural stupidity. So don't let anyone fool you on that. We're going to be looking at demystifying artificial intelligence in layman's terms, everyday speak, how we can use it to help in our broking or advisory business. Will artificial intelligence replace human beings? Do we need loads of money? And what are the pitfalls and warnings around the use of AI, and then the legal requirements for the use of AI in your practice? So without further ado, we'll get on to the first part. So let's have a look at artificial intelligence. It's one of those things where you're at a sort of industry cocktails, and guys like to throw around artificial intelligence. And I always try be funny, and I say, well, which one of the 8 forms of intelligence are we talking about? And then you get a blank look, and they move it across to the other side of the room. So let's look at artificial intelligence. There are, in actual fact, 8. Some contain 9 forms of intelligence, but for the purpose of today, I'm going to use the theory posited by Howard Gardner. So the first one is linguistic, which we know as IQ, logical mathematical, which is IQ, spatial, body kinesthetic, musical, intrapersonal and interpersonal, which is the EQ, and then naturalistic. So for the purposes of today's presentation, we're going to mainly focus on 1 and 2, linguistic and logical mathematical. That doesn't mean that you can't use AI for any of the others. And in fact, there has been remarkable developments, especially in the case of interpersonal and intrapersonal. But if we can carry on to the next slide then. Okay, so in the 2 years of exploring, playing around, and studying artificial intelligence, I've come to the conclusion that the primary benefit for an insurance advisor or broker is one of time saving. So we look at the time taken to research new and unfamiliar products or insurance subject matter. learning about one's clients. So if your client is out there on social media, on the internet, you'll be quite amazed what AI can tell you about their business. And then providing body to familiar risk and insurance discussions and so on. So all of the above are becoming increasingly important in the lives of a risk advisor and insurance broker. Risks are becoming exponentially more integrated and complex. The standard of the reasonable broker has been pushed higher on the basis of clients' knowledge, thanks to the internet being reasonably and readily accessible. So what we're saying is if you don't do the research yourself, you quite possibly face a client who may know more about the subject matter than what we profess to. So that's why we need to do this. I took to DeepSeek soon after its launch on my own laptop and mobile, as my company's system blocked me from using any other AI than Copilot, which is a Microsoft product. But I then looked, and we can go to the next slide. I posed the question, what is the best approach to design an integrated risk management plan for a commercial client? And Bing, and I'm going to use Bing because there's no sound effects on artificial intelligence, so I thought Bing would be a good sound. 60 seconds later, I might be lying, it could be 52, but 60 is a nice round number. I received a fairly good plan, not 100%, but at least an 80% effective plan. The key benefit, though, was the 80% was delivered within 60 seconds. Now, if I had done that myself, it might have taken me 2 to 3 hours to research to get to the 80% level, probably another hour to set it all out. And when I looked at this, what it was performing in sort of 60 seconds, it could probably spend a half an hour from my side, and it will be exactly what I required. Now, there is a warning there that because I've been around the block for a few decades, I understand what the content should read. The danger of just accepting that AI is giving you the truth and nothing but the truth can be quite dangerous. So don't just accept whatever it spews out. You need someone that knows what they're talking about to have a look through to see at sort of what level it is. Can we go to the next slide? I then tried another question, and I said, what changes have insurers globally made to their products to cater for electric vehicles? The reason why I said globally is I don't think too much has been done in the South African context. Hybrid vehicles and self-driving vehicles, and yet again, ubiquitous Bing, 60 seconds later, a 3-part response with each part containing around 6 subsets, all in 60 seconds. I probably gave DeepSeek a 65% score, but again, it was achieved in less than 60 seconds. Had I applied my mind to the topic, to get to the DeepSeek level of response may have taken me an hour or 2. Using the response received, I found it possible to expand by searching for the key points mentioned. Example, will my insurance cover the cost of recycling and or disposing of the batteries of my electric vehicle? Bing, another 45 seconds, and a reasonable answer was provided. A little open-ended, but at least addressing the topic. So what I found was that because AI is algorithmic, a lot of the answers that it's going to give will depend on the questioning that you put forward. So if it's very vague, you're likely to get a vague response from AI. If it's specific and explicit, you're likely to get a more specific and explicit response. Okay, we can carry on to the next one. So how can we actually use AI in our broking or advisory business? Okay, the most important aspect I found is the sheer speed of what AI app delivers. If I have a typical document taking me 3 hours of research, compiling, setting out, etc., AI does it in 60 seconds or less, at least to a degree of 80 to 90% on most occasions. So this may reduce the preparation time from 3 hours to around a half an hour. If I'm the typical broker, let's say I do this type of document once a day, and I'm saving sort of 2.5 hours a day. That means I'm saving 12.5 hours a week, and that means I'm saving 50 hours a month. And I'm one person. If I have a business where 3 people are doing that, it's 150 hours a month, which is quite significant. As an example, I've used DeepSeek to answer the following risk and insurance related questions. And for those of you who are interested, I've asked AI over 100 different questions pertaining to risk and insurance business, from products to specific policy types, etc., etc. I asked it what are the main exclusions in a D&O liability policy, and what are the main risks facing security companies when rendering security services to businesses. I was quite astounded, actually, on the main risk facing security companies. Was quite eye-opening for me. I thought I knew a few things about these risks, and there were definitely one or two things I would have not thought about off the cuff. So the more that one gets explicit, so on directors and officers liability, one would perhaps couch it in a South African context pertaining to the Companies Act in South Africa, as opposed to just a generic question. But let's go on to the next slide. So I get to the $1 million question. Notice I didn't say rand, $1 million question. How can artificial intelligence be of use to my practice? A quick 60 seconds later and a response which makes for interesting reading. Risk assessment and pricing, deploying predictive analytics and dynamic pricing. Obviously, that will depend on the size and scope of your particular practice. Claims processing, automated claims handling. So one of the things that we're finding, and I find it even in our own practice, is the amount of time we spend manually transferring the same information to 5 different places. And I'm saying surely we should be able to capture information once and then send it automatically to the 5 places it should be. That in itself will cut down a large number of hours that go by. We look at customer services using chatbots and virtual assistants. I'm not sure how relevant to a smaller personal broker a chatbot would be. Personalized recommendations based on customer profiles, data management and analysis, big data, natural language processing, Ronald's favorite, regulatory compliance, market analysis, operational efficiency, customer retention and acquisition. So obviously not all of these topics will be equally applicable to a practice, but the fact is that you can obtain this information. For those of you interested, I can actually share the document that came out based on those 10. I'll send it to Bernard and he can then share it with you to see what sort of information comes out of these queries. Can we go on to the next slide? Okay, big question you're all asking. Will artificial intelligence replace human beings? Okay, here's another AI sound. Duh. Okay. If it's not yet, I think it should be patented. Can AI go for a good lunch with a few drinks? Unlikely at this stage. Although any day with these AI companions, you never know. But that's a subject for a different discussion. Can AI play a round of golf or paddle? No, not yet, as far as I'm aware. And then my favorite, can AI tell a few good corny jokes, particularly after a few drinks? Unlikely, and I haven't tested it. So I don't know, maybe AI will be able to tell some good dad jokes, as my kids call it. In all seriousness, though, there are a lot of jobs which may be at risk, particularly in roles requiring repetitive or predictable tasks. I'm just going to close my camera off so I can take a drink of water quickly, but I'll carry on. Okay, so they're unlikely to replace human beings in jobs that require creativity, and broking is full of that. Emotional intelligence at the moment, which is a broking tact. And the emotional intelligence a lot is based on trust. So the party that you're negotiating with, do they trust you? And then obviously complex decision making, which I don't think artificial intelligence is going to replace anytime soon. Can we go to the next page? Okay, so AI will increasingly augment human capabilities, transferring the nature of their work and creating new opportunities. The bad news is certain functions where there's repetitive work and capturing and repeating the same information, I think there's a big chance that they could be replaced by artificial intelligence. But to my mind, that then leaves more time to focus on the particular human skills, which is the emotional intelligence, the relationships, etc. To thrive in this changing landscape, however, human beings will need to adapt, to upskill and embrace lifelong learning. And AI, once you get used to it, I wouldn't say it loses its aura and mystery, but then once you can see what it can do and how it can help you in everyday work, I think adoption will become a lot easier. Ultimately, the use of AI should be to enhance human potential rather than simply replace it. Next slide, please. Do we need loads of money? Good question. I'm a cheapskate. I downloaded DeepSeek free of charge. All it costs is my data. But your particular company may be a bit more concerned about DeepSeek, particularly because I think it was developed by China. So you might want to use some of the more mainstream ChatGPT, which could be about 400 Rand a month. I see the license for Copilot via Microsoft is about 6,600 Rand a year. But even at that price, if you break it down, it's about 500 Rand a month. So you could be using AI in your own practice for around about 400 to 500 Rand a month. And maybe what you do is use something like DeepSeek initially while you're learning and training. And that includes learning how to ask questions under AI. Apparently, there is a course that helps you develop your questioning to get the answers that you expect. We go to the next slide, please. So what are the pitfalls and warnings around the use of AI? As with everything, there are downsides to it all. There are a few matters for consideration, no particular order. The one is algorithmic bias, so systematic and repeatable errors in a system leading to unfair outcomes. So one of the things we said is just because it's AI doesn't mean it's infallible. You always need to check. There's data privacy concerns. Now, this is an interesting one. Most of the information that's gathered by AI is available on the internet and or social media. So if it's out there, how is it privacy? That's the one question which I hope Ronald will address when I'm finished. There's lack of transparency in decision making, and there's also then the potential over-reliance on AI. So once we get really used to it and see that AI can do my job and I can go learn how to play golf properly at last, there could be the danger there. You also have inaccurate risk assessments due to biased data. So one of the things that you need to be mindful of is that you're always checking and verifying the data which the AI is used to arrive at a conclusion. There's also security vulnerability. So all this information that I've found out about my client, where do I keep it? Can it be hacked? Can it be accessed? If I'm a risk advisor or insurance broker for high-profile people in terms of my VIP personal offerings, and I get to know a lot about them as clients, how do I keep that information safe from others? On regulatory non-compliance is a major issue, and on that note, I'll thank you for your time, and I'll hand over to Ronald King, but we will have some questions for both Ronald and I before he gets going. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Peter. Really insightful and practical. I really enjoyed that. So thank you very much. We do have a little bit of time. Yes,
I must say,
please, Mr. King.
Peter said that we will have to stop him after 2 hours. Peter, this was from 15 minutes. So would you like to go through the slides again?
I'll go through slowly. There's lots of additional information, but you don't want to sort of overwhelm people from the outset. Although, as I did say, that there are examples of some of the info that I've pulled and I've used in my slides for you to have a look at for your own practices to see if it's useful. Okay.
Perfect. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you.
Ronald,
Okay,
do you have any questions you'd like to put forward to Peter at this stage? I do know I've got a few burning questions, but I'd love if you want to jump in, not being selfish and asking all the questions myself. So, Ronald, if you have any questions that you'd like to put forward to Peter, please go ahead, sir.
Peter, something that you mentioned, and it's to me a real big concern when it comes to AI. You gave on your slides, you gave your reports from AI a score, some of them 80, 90, some of them 65%. And then you mentioned something, and I think you maybe mentioned it very quickly, that you said it worked for you because of the fact that you've been in this industry for 125 years, give or take. Give or take a month.
Yeah.
Am I to understand that putting the AI app into the hands of my paraplanner is going to be a mistake?
Yes and no, as a good South African response. Yes, because we need to be mindful of the limitations of AI and the individuals using it. You know, if you've got 6 months experience and you use AI, it's not going to escalate you suddenly to have 30 years worth of knowledge. There is a path that still needs to be able to identify which part of the information is right or wrong. But I'm also all for giving the tools out for people to play around with it, to see what it can produce. And then whatever the information that comes out should be tested against someone who has a few decades worth of experience to enable you to give a score. You know, on some of the things that I did, where even despite my long years in the industry, I was amazed at some of the information that came out because I definitely didn't think of it. It became quite logical when I saw it, and then I kicked myself for not thinking of it. So I think, you know, to your question, long story short, is allow them to play with it, but keep it under control. So don't just let them use it unabated without any supervision.
Because I mean, I've got a research team that assists me in my job at PSG and the regulatory affairs side. Now I open up DeepSeek or one of the other, ChatGPT or one of the others, Manus, that's just been published now by also by China. And in the end of the day, I'm now not going to know what of that information I can trust and what not. So suddenly now, as a person that needs to work from the information that I get from them, I lose the trust in that info. So I've got a little bit of a concern about how you actually apply the use of this inside your practices, especially with your paraplanners and the likes.
Yeah, I think you start right at the beginning, which is when the question is posited or posed. There's apparently a course that teaches you how to ask the question of AI. There's also another way, which is if you've got 2 or 3 versions of AI, whether it's ChatGPT, Copilot, or DeepSeek, ask them the same question and then see what answers come out. If all else fails, there is always the old-fashioned, and notice, old-fashioned internet. If those people are still Googling and that's old-fashioned, not quite as old-fashioned as going to the library, but just about. So you can always use that to, you know, check on the AI.
Now, just for interest sake, the courses that you're talking about, one of my colleagues is really into this ChatGPT and the like. He's got paid versions of multiple of these AI programs. And he said that the courses that he's done has made a massive difference. So he started, he says that the 2 top ones are Udemy and Coursera, that gives you these courses. Some of the courses that he, for example, did was Intro to ChatGPT and Generative AI, integrating with ChatGPT, custom GPT actions. He also had a complete guide to custom GPTs and actions. So all of these are courses that he did by through Udemy, data analysis with ChatGPT in Excel. So for those of you that are wondering how can you do this, how can you actually get that skill, it was always interesting. And I'm talking here about the days of Google. My colleague that runs the operational legal side at PSG, I would ask a question to Google and not get the answer, and he will ask the question to Google and he would get it. Leon just had the ability all these years to pinpoint the question. So I think it's a very, very important part. The question, two things. Last year when I did I did a webinar course with the Stellenbosch Business School, and I asked the professor, so first the story and then the question, I asked the professor there if they don't have a problem with all the people using AI for their master's theses. And she says, no, that's not a problem. We just submit the thesis to ChatGPT and ask it, did you write it? And it will tell us, yes, I wrote it, or I wrote 90% of it, or 80% of it, or the works. And the thing that she said that concerns them the most was the fact that artificial intelligence have actually already become human, because it bloody well lies. It's called hallucinating, I understand. Hallucinating data. And I see that the first reports that's come out of Manus, the new the AI, says that it has really big problems with hallucinating. So how do you manage the hallucination of all of these AI apps?
Okay. So I think back to the original thing of under supervision and double checking the information that comes out, because there's no guarantee that it's going to be 100% all the time. Remember that AI is largely driven by algorithms, and the algorithms connect to words. So the way that your sentence or question is structured and the words that you use can be a trigger for AI to adopt either a marketing approach, a scientific approach, a legal approach, etc. So I think with everything at this point in time, we still need to be checking what's coming out on the other side. In the examples that I've used, gone through it, in some cases 60%, some cases 80%, and I've thought it's neither the 60 or 80. The fact that it's delivered in 60 seconds is a big help, because that cuts down my time that I need to add my paragraph or two to add in the missing pieces. So that to me is, if we had a takeaway from today, it's really about the time that it can save you in doing tasks which would otherwise keep you from your clients or keep you from advising your clients. So that's one thing. The other thing as well is, obviously if you at a lesser level of knowledge, it does enable you to gain access to information which you probably do need. The question though is how accurate it is. You would still need someone to vet it for you.
I think that is that takes me over to the next questions that I have about AI. The first one, as you could hear, was how much I can trust it. I think the second one is that probably most of our future jobs that will be available is going to be in forensics and actually going to be up on checking up on AI. Would you be agreeing with that?
Yes, the more that you're reliant on AI, the more you have to manufacture systems and processes to validate AI. Because as the world becomes more used to it, and we can see it with WhatsApp and the old SMS and MMS, the one thing criminals do is they latch on pretty quickly to trends and they adopt it quicker than most. And so if we start believing that everything that comes out of AI is gospel, then we are letting ourselves in for a surprise at some stage.
Yeah, I mean, we have touched when we've spoken before. We've spoken about deepfake and the fact that in a couple of years, I'm not going to be sure that I'm actually speaking to you. The deepfake version of Bernard is, of course, an upgrade. Bernard, I don't know if you want to upgrade yourself there a little bit, but it is a risk for us going forward that it will be very difficult for you to actually trust what you see and what you hear.
Yeah, it will be almost like the real world. Will we trust what we see and hear from anyone? Whether it's there's our Bernard. You quite good looking there, Bernard.
Yeah, his hair's never looked better. His hair's never looked better.
Yeah. But I think, to the point that it is becoming an inevitable part of our world, so we can't ignore it. It's not going to go away. So I would advocate that we learn to use it, learn its weaknesses and strengths, and we try build it into our processes alongside things like machine learning. So often people confuse the two. They are quite distinct processes. The one automates processes. Sometimes it uses AI, but in other cases it's just robotics. But I think in every organization, big or small, there's different degrees of usage and how it can help your business going forward. Because the world isn't going to get easier. The risks are not going to get simpler. So you need every bit of help that you can get, I think.
Peter, one of the things that people have constantly told me, and you've touched on it, although you didn't go there all the way, said that because of human emotions and because of feeling and stuff, you were talking about padel and golf and all of those things that I don't do. Yeah. You said that our humans are safe, but I would like to argue, and it comes from a personal experience that I had in 2019 before COVID. I went to be an umpire at the top 10 chess championship in London, and it was at the Google head office. So I met Mike Hassebis and the DeepMind team, and they showed us the AI that they already had in 2019. Oh. And I was sat down in front of a computer and I spoke to a woman on the computer, and she greeted me and said, "Welcome to London." And she knew stuff about me, and I think it was 3 or 4 minutes, 5 minutes at tops, that I forgot I was actually talking to artificial intelligence, and I was actually starting to respond to her like I would have responded to a normal person. And it brings me back to something that I learned years ago that said that trust is built on 3 things: credibility, reliability, and intimacy. And the first 2 is the computer beats us. We've seen already now, other than for probably the hallucination and stuff, the AI is going to have much more data and much more information than I have. And that's one of my biggest risks, because for the past 30 years, I've sold myself as the guy that knows the most. Now AI knows more than I am. So what's my future job? The second one is reliability. AI is very good at that. And then when it comes to intimacy, if I have enough data of you, I can fake intimacy. So what do we as advisors actually do to safeguard that job? Because I'm not sure that what you said is enough.
Okay. So in the fields of emotional intelligence, intrapersonal, interpersonal, there's some elements which AI has come close to mimicking, but not quite. And part of the reason for that is we have such a thing called gut feel. Now, they haven't developed anything, as far as I'm aware of, an AI that deals with gut feel. It can be also, in the old days, they would say, do you trust that person if they've got an open face? Or AI hasn't yet learned that trick. So these are human characteristics born out of the trait of being human as opposed to being a computer. So that's the subtle difference. It can fake it quite well, as we've seen with all sorts of sort of humanoids that have been developed by the likes of Musk and others. And I'm not including all of the people that Musk knows. But yeah, it's something which is inevitable and it will get better. So there is a possibility one day you can walk into PSG and you could be meeting with Ronald Prince, who's the lesser known brother of Ronald King, and he can look and sound and be just as humorous as Ronald King.
I
Possible.
actually take it a little bit different, Peter. I've got a talk that I do about 2040, and in 2040, you won't be walking to my offices at the Mall of Africa. You will actually be meeting me in the metaverse, where we will have an office, and there will be an AI version as pretty as I am sitting there doing the talking. Bernard, you have to come in because I've got so many questions for Peter. If you've got anything, and I've got a few questions that's come up here on the side that I'm going to address now as well, or if you so Peter, coming back to the question, because it's also something that our clients ask us, and I like brokers to be, or intermediaries to be, in a position where they can answer those questions for their clients, because again, that makes them less replaceable. What should kids nowadays go and study to make sure that in this world where you've been working with AI and these things, what should they be looking at going to study to ensure that they actually have a future?
I think anything to do with technology these days is a must. But I would say specific studies on artificial intelligence, because it's one of those things that the more you know about it and how it works, how it thinks, how it presents information, the better position one is going to be in to optimize its use. And I've proved that just by dabbling around, by asking AI the same question but in different forms. So I've asked it 3 times in a different way to see what responses came out. And then I questioned why it was responding in a certain way. And it was to do with the language that I was couching my question in. I did an example where I said, I've got a risk and insurance business. Would it be worthwhile considering Peter Olliott for a job? And I was quite amazed. It was 60 seconds, bing, and it really produced a CV that even I would struggle to come up with. And it obviously latched onto the marketing part, because it started marketing Peter Olliott to me. It was stuff which I would never think of. So I think there will be a skill, and those people, will all have access to AI, but some will have more access or unequal access, and that's what you're looking for, always getting an edge in your business.
My wife has always doubted her English capabilities. So whenever she had to write a letter to any of her English clients, she would first send it to me, and I would have to edit it. Now she gives it to Microsoft, and then she sends it to me, and I say, "Oh my word! I wish I could write like this." So it is clear that AI has an exceptionally good capability when I give him something I've written and I say, make it better. Have you, and it's a question that's come up here from Solomon's side, have you tested the capability of AI to write records of advice and other legal documents within the requirements of the FISA Act?
Yeah, I've looked at a couple of questions which I've posed, which would be standard for a broker to respond to. On risk and advice, uninsured risks. Uninsured risk is one of my pet subjects, mainly because the majority of what I've seen is a tick box, and what FSCA says, or FAIS requires, is that you have to have had a decent conversation with your client and explain the product. And have you done it properly? If you can't explain properly what you discuss with the client, it doesn't mean that you're going to get off the hook, because it's uninsured risk. So it's that application of real life. Is it allowing me to do my job? And remember, we've said that the standard of the reasonable broker by implication is being lifted all the time because of client access to the same information. You don't want to have a client like Ronald who's going to suddenly go into AI and say, Peter Olliott's coming to talk to me about this cover. Let me do it. And then I get there and you pose the first 2 questions. I have bubbles because I haven't done the same research. So that to me is one of the important aspects for an ordinary brokerage to consider, is that whole compliance issue. the way that we need to go about doing things is probably not how we've been doing it up to now. Hope that answers the question.
Jock has asked, what's the difference in information between the paid version and the free version?
You get what you pay for or don't pay for. But I was quite impressed with the free version of DeepSeek, and it upset a whole lot of people that live in that big continent up where Elon lives, because what they did was they used ChatGPT to formulate their own processes and questions, and they did it for next to nothing. But I have checked ChatGPT, Copilot, DeepSeek on the same question to see what comes out, and remarkably similar. Even the laying out and setting out of the responses was quite similar.
I actually specifically asked this to my colleague when I asked him whether I should start using paid version, and he said the big difference between ChatGPT paid and free is that when you do the paid version, it guarantees the authenticity of it, and that you won't be sued for a few things. So that to me is probably a good value add. Bernard, please, if you've got questions.
Lovely, thank you, Mr. King.
I've got 100 more. I'm trying to use up the time so that at a stage I'm going to say, okay, we're done. I'm not going to talk about legislation.
We can't forget you still have a presentation ahead, Mr. King. So no, perfect. Thank you for those awesome questions. I'm going to just check the Q&A very quickly. We have gone through some. Lizelle asks, how can intermediaries partner with insurtech companies to leverage AI? Which I think is interesting, partnering with insurtech companies, or is that even needed or recommended, Peter, or is it a difference of opinion?
I think it just depends on which parts of AI you want to be using in your own practice. So if you want to go into things like risk assessments and pricing and all of those good things, then probably a good idea to pull someone in from a tech space, claims processing, customer service, all of those things. But if you're using it for some of the things that we spoke about, I don't really think it's necessary, other than checking the output and then refining the questions to get as close to the output as one wants, whether it's an uninsured risks discussion, a discussion on risks facing security companies, risks facing a driver or owner of electric vehicle, which is quite timely in a South African context, because to my understanding, none of the local insurers have adapted their product yet to cater specifically for electric or electric hybrid vehicles. I still ask, my favorite question is, so when my vehicle breaks down, my electric vehicle, and the guy rocks up with 5 liters of petrol, what should I say? But they didn't laugh at the joke, so hopefully, but they'll take it to heart and help develop the product.
Fair enough. Thank you, Peter.
Bernard, I don't know if you can just add, put up that slide that Peter had where he says the uses that a broker could use within his practice. Because Peter, and you kind of touched on it, there's two parts to AI that we as intermediaries can use, and I think it kind of also differs on the work that you're doing within your practice. Now there was I think it's in
I think it's after this one. There we are.
Because there is the automation parts to it, and then there is the research part to it, and a lot of the things that we've been discussing was kind of on the research side, although you do list a number of things here. When you're talking about risk assessment and pricing, deploying, what are you talking about here? I can understand it for an insurer, but where would you as a broker be using this?
Okay, so it depends on the size of the brokerage and the access of information. So if you've got a personal client base of, say, 10,000 personal clients, and you've got all their loss information, including their uninsured claims that they've submitted over the past 10 years, you can get a pretty good idea of, from an assessment point of view, perhaps what common uninsured risks have come up, and also what sort of claims have occurred, and then you adjust your product and pricing accordingly, rather than leaving it in the hands of an insurer. And what can happen is, as a sole practice, you could have those 10,000 clients spread amongst 20 insurers. And those 20 insurers aren't going to necessarily have the information in the format that you require. So one of the things that it does do is it puts power back in the hands of the intermediary to determine the look and feel and product structuring and pricing of their products. But it will only depend if you've got sufficient numbers to make it worthwhile doing that.
I've, of course, got a very big concern about this whole thing about risk assessment and personalization. If any insurance company were to analyze the data, they would see that the 2 houses in Helderkruin that get hit by lightning is mine and my neighbors. If they take us out of their insurance claims, they would get no insurance claims in this area because all the lightning hits our 2 houses. And that to me is a problem that you're going to have in the future, that you kind of lose the whole purpose of insurance, which is to carry that risk or spread that risk over a pool.
So if you haven't realized, it's been happening already for a while. When we grew up, it was the losses of the many, or the losses of the few are paid for by the premiums of the many. And what they've done now through this sort of identification of clients and segmentation is, they're segmenting, whether it's by color or by grade or whatever. So the poor guys that sit like yourself in Helderkruin, you left at the mercy of the market, or you got to find an insurer that doesn't have access to all of that data and still gives you a good deal. It is a fact, and what I'm saying is, if you, as a intermediary, allow yourself to be dictated to by those who ostensibly have the information, then you're at a disadvantage. And that can also account for all of us as intermediaries, including the small intermediaries. We'd be better off pooling all of our data into an FIA-friendly pool, which can do our own risk assessment and analysis and help in product structure and design. That's just my view.
You said automated claims handling. Is that again by using a kind of an automated process in the claims processing?
Yeah. So what we found is certain insurers already using AI based on the loss type, the time of day the loss happens, the day it happens. If their name's Bernard or Ronald, then it pops up and says, "Don't just pay this, please check it and investigate." But for those claims that do go through the process, the time they don't even point to loss adjusters and whatever, so the cost saving on those claims is tremendous, and they can improve the turnaround time. I mean, for any insurer, to my mind, the objective must be to put the money back in your pocket as quickly as they take it when their premium is taken every month. That should be the ultimate goal. And AI, I think, can help. Again, 80% of the claims, it should be able to achieve that. Yeah.
One of the things, and I don't know if you're going to have the answer to it, but again, it comes with all the fake news, disinformation, and misinformation out there. And a lot of the time, let's put it this way, a very good lie. They always told me, if you want to tell a very good lie, make sure that 70% of it is the truth.
Yeah.
And that is currently one of the big problems that we have on the internet. If I'm doing a market analysis and somebody writes a fake news story about a tsunami about to hit Japan, if I've got my systems, as you said, my market analysis, everything built on the data that it's getting in, isn't there a risk that I'm now suddenly going to sell everything that I have on the Japan Stock Exchange because of the fact that my system has said there's this tsunami. My black box just goes and boof sells. That generates the other AIs to see, oh, somebody is selling, so we must sell, and you create the chaos that actually didn't exist.
Okay, well, that is what sells in social media, is create these made-up stories. You know, King Charles boots Camilla or whatever her name is, and then people fall for it and read it as though it's gospel. So we do have means of verifying information. So to your point on the tsunami in Tokyo, if it really was a tsunami, it's likely to be on Reuters and World Breaking News, any of the stations. Check.
As long as they don't use AI, we're safe.
Yeah, as long as they're still using on-the-ground reporting, we're safe. But it is feasible and possible. You know, there's always the danger of everyone wants to be first with the story. No one necessarily verifies it initially. Sometimes later, 24 hours later, they say, well, sorry, we got it wrong. But on that point, I mean, I think I see your picture here, and it's time to hand over to you on compliance.
There's a few questions that's come in. If we quickly touch on them,
okay.
Then we can jump over to the compliance side, which is very boring, and I can do it in 1 minute. Richard Colby said, how should we leverage private data to produce enhanced advice above generic AI tools, and what are those data points that we should use?
I would say that's a good question. Am I still supposed to be answering, or is it your turn?
Yes, no, that you can answer that, and if you want to, you can actually type that into DeepSeek and say, Peter, let's see what the answer is that you can get from AI if you type that one in.
Okay, so you'll have to give me a bit of time and repeat the question, then I'll type it in and you can move to the next one.
How should we leverage private data to produce enhanced advice above generic AI tools?
Okay, carry on and I will...
I think here's Frederick Hartje said, what about logic, Peter? Presumably zero. I think it's about that point that you made about gut feeling. It's that thing that the human mind is able to take historic data, our experiences, bring it all together, and then make informative jumps without any logical conclusion or logical reason to get to that conclusion. But if you look back, you can see it was actually correct.
Yeah, so we mustn't forget that the human brain is actually the most advanced computer there is, except it's natural intelligence and not artificial, so it's not made up or pre-programmed. It comes with many generations and decades of fine-tuning and development, so that makes it sometimes difficult to understand. And notice that I kept it gender neutral, that response, but it has been known to be quite a difficult instrument to understand the logic and how people make decisions. I mean, there's ample examples of people who started multi-billion rand businesses on a gut feel.
Now, I understand that somebody recently asked DeepSeek, can you help me understand women? And it said, I'm not that smart.
You said it, I didn't. But
what's Richard's answer from DeepSeek?
I can say it's too long to respond to, but it's using private data to advise clients, requires careful handling to ensure compliance with legal and ethical standards, particularly regarding data privacy and confidentiality. Here's a structured approach, and then it gave 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then 8 items, and then an example scenario, which I'll happily copy and send to you, Bernard, so we can provide a written response to that question.
That's super nice. Then, of course, our CEO must make our life difficult with a question here from her. A client asks you as the advisor, how will you use predictive data and artificial intelligence to advise me and my employees? What should your answer be? What should an answer be if a client asks you, are you using AI in your business?
I think we should say yes, but we're balancing it with the human touch. so we don't rely solely on AI. But what it does do is it can speed up the allocation or acquisition of the insights we require to render advice. So if we had to do it manually, pulling with our Excel spreadsheet could take us 2 or 3 weeks versus pressing a button and getting it in 60 seconds, and then spending a day or so building the report for the client. So those are the advantages of using AI.
Peter, I understand that you need to leave to go and fact check DeepSeek.
Yeah,
Bernard, I don't know if you had any further questions for Peter.
Not at this stage. Thank you, Mr. King, and thank you, Peter, for your time and your interesting presentation. Really appreciate it. I'm sure there's going to be a few more questions, and we'll be sure to pop them over to you, and we'll share what you've obtained as well with all the members here today. So thank you, Peter, and thank you, Ronald, for posing those questions towards Peter. You are definitely the skilled person to ask those questions. I appreciate it.
And I shall return the favor one day. Thank you.
I'm sure you will, Peter. Thank you so much, Peter. So right now, we are going to be heading over into your presentation, Mr. King. As the FIA Vice President from PSG World, we are very excited for your presentation on legal requirements around the use of AI. I know you said that, the legal stuff can be done in a minute, but I do think we should take maybe 2 minutes because I myself have quite a few questions on the ethics, the legalities, the data sharing, and just in general, the compliance around using AI. I think Peter touched on having to use his personal cell phone because his company was blocking ChatGPT. So there's a million things floating around in my head, but I'm going to hand over to you, Mr. King. Please go ahead and take us through your presentation, sir.
Thank you very much, Bernard. And I see Doreen has already also started asking the legal and ethical questions because it is a really, really big problem. And I'm going to get to it on the next slide. I only have the 2 slides that I'm going to focus on. Francois also asked maybe FIA should have something like a central knowledge base where more of this information could be shared. Well, we actually do have that information available, and we also try and share it with our monthly newsletters and stuff. So yeah, get into contact with your region, and they will be able to assist you in that regard. Jock is also, and I see somebody else has asked whether this recording is going to be available. I take it would be, Bernard, because that's the normal way that we do it at the FIA.
Absolutely. Thank you, sir.
So the thing that we need to understand is that the whole AI has actually happened much faster than any legislator can happen. The biggest risk that we actually have is that our legislator does what they normally do if something new happens, is they take a massive hammer and don't try and distinguish between what is happening and see everything for a nail and just bash it. So at this stage, I think what we are seeing out there is much better than previous times. The guys are not running and trying to just throw legislation out there. But there are pieces of legislation out there that has already impacted the way that we can look at these stuff. So the first thing that we have is, of course, POPI. Now, the Protection of Personal Information Act has been around for a while. Most of the parts now, or everything is now enacted. And Chapter 3 there sets the conditions that you need to meet if you are actually trying to lawfully process any information. And what's important there is that you need to have consent when you start using most of the information. There's 8 conditions, accountability, and we'll get back to that later on again. When using the information, there's always processing limitations that you need to adhere to. So coming back, and that's one of the concerns that I have also with the question that I think it was Richard that was asking it, is any information that you collect can only be used for the purpose that you collected. So using it now to populate and train AI, that's definitely not part of the reason why you use it. So in a way, it's actually not legitimate to provide all of the information that you have on your computer to AI, make it accessible. It's interestingly enough the same reason why these cell phone apps that you can use to determine whether it's spam or not, that asks you access to all the personal telephone information that you have on your cell phone, you're actually not allowed to use that. Giving all your cell phone information to those apps is actually a breach of POPI. Even though the benefit of it is massive, it is not something that you are allowed to do under the POPI Act. So those Chapter 3 conditions, and you will see, and I had the privilege, as I said, I've got the colleague Hugo Gous here with me, and he is our head trader. He uses AI extensively to do our summaries of any company publications that come out. So any SENS announcement, any financial reports of of any company on the JSE, he uses AI to take that and create an amazing report with graphs and everything. So really great that what he can do for the stockbroking part of our business with it. And he used the AI, and I actually gave him my presentation, and he ran it through DeepSeek, he ran it through ChatGPT, he ran it through Grok, I think was the other one that he put it through. So it was really interesting to see what he came back with. But all of the AI, when we asked the question about what is the most important legislative requirement for AI, they all came back and said POPI in South Africa is extremely strict on how you're allowed to use data within artificial intelligence. So please be very, very careful. Now, as Peter quite rightly said, is that when you're asking a question to DeepSeek, when you're getting information about what is the best way to do this or what is the best way to do that, you're not using your own personal information. You're going, and it's basically the information that's on the internet that you are accessing, and there's no issue with that. The big problem starts happening when you start automating processes within your business, where you start using information, for example, automation of the claims process and the like. Now you're starting to use the claims experience of a client, which is personal information. You're putting it into the system, and the system uses that. And the second thing that it actually does is it transfers that personal information to the cloud outside of the Republic, which is in contravention with Section 72 of the POPI Act. So immediately there's additional contravention that happens in there. The other interesting thing about Section 71 of the POPI Act is it says that a subject may not be subjected to a decision solely based on automated processing of personal information. So that becomes very important on that perspective. If you're using their personal information and you're making decisions solely based on that, you're running into problems. There's a lot of requirements that you then need to meet. One of the things is that you can contractually have a person agree to it. And of course, that means that the fine print that we read in many of our contracts with the banks and everything is now going to have, we can use this to blacklist you and never give you any money in the future. So you need to be very wary about all this fine print. That you just stick the I've consented, and you just click the tick box and you've never read it. It's funny that everyone else can get away with it, but when we do it in the financial services industry as an intermediary, then immediately you didn't tell the client about the fact that he needs 2 tracking devices, because the fact that he ticked it now suddenly doesn't work. So the other interesting thing that also comes out of some of the other legislation, and the next slide when I'm going to talk about that, is that you must be able to explain the logic to a client. You need to be able to explain to the client, how did the automated advice process use its data, and what was the logic behind it, why it came to the conclusion that it got. So if you do not understand it, and that to me is an extremely important principle that I've just learned with Kleterzone again, which was one of those investment opportunities that we have been fighting from the start. If you do not understand it, don't sell it. If you don't understand it, don't use it. And that is a very important principle when you start using AI automated systems within the process. So at this stage, government is doing quite a lot of work in developing a framework for artificial intelligence in South Africa. We've got the Intergovernmental FinTech Working Group that is looking at all of this. That's got the Prudential Authority, FSCA, National Treasury, everyone involved, and where they are looking at what are all the regulatory stuff that they need to look. We've also just had a document that's come out from South Africa, the South African National Artificial Intelligence Policy Framework, that is creating the policy framework within which all of these ground rules will apply in future. But what is interesting is that the joint standard that was issued by the Prudential Authority and the FSCA on IT governance and risk management in 2023 has already been applicable since the 15th of November 2024. The second one, the joint standard on cybersecurity and cyber resilience requirements, is currently in the implementation phase, and I think it's June that we need to comply with that as well. Now, what is important to this is that, and George Dell and his cohort needs to listen to this. If you're a CIS manager, these 2 joint standards apply to you. If you're a Cat 2 advisor, these 2 joint standards apply to you as well. It requires you to have an IT strategy. It requires you to have an IT risk management framework, as well as a sound and robust cybersecurity strategy. Peter touched on it, that when you start using automated decision-making tools, when you start using artificial intelligence, you open your data up to these artificial intelligence modules. It could well be that the artificial intelligence module that you're opening it up to is not a DeepSeek or a ChatGPT, but it's actually artificial intelligence miner from one of the hacking groups. So when you start looking at using any of these things, do not do it if you do not have a very decent IT strategy, risk management framework, and a cybersecurity structure within your business. If you do not have those guys, if you do not have an IT division, don't go there, because you are going to find yourself in big problems. The other interesting thing that many of our advisors are not aware of is that Board Notice 194 of 2017, and just shows you how up to date our FSCA is, actually sets fit and proper requirements on what you as a business need to meet when it comes to being a fit and proper. So as soon as you start using automated advice, Section 38, and that's what I'm going to discuss on the next slide, Section 38 is very, very important for you in this regard. So if we look at that section, you'll see that subsection 1 says, if you are using automated advice, you must have adequate and appropriate human resources that have the required competence. So basically, you need to have somebody that's overseeing your automated advice, that robo-advisor, as we used to call them, that understands the technology and algorithms used to provide the automated advice, understands the methodological approaches, including the assumptions embedded in the algorithms, understand the preferences or biases that exist, and this is where the ethics come into this. But just before I touch on the ethics, the first two things are showing you that your programmer, the person that's actually writing these algorithms, needs to understand the 6 steps of financial planning and needs to understand what the assumptions are that we are using within financial planning. If they don't understand that, if they don't understand on a wealth side or on a non-life side, all of the underlying assumptions, then you are going to have a problem. When it comes to the ethical side and the biased side, most of these apps use information that they're drawing from the internet, and unfortunately the internet isn't factually always correct. It's disinformation, misinformation, and biased information. So you will quite quickly find that these algorithms can actually perpetuate many of the racist biases, female biases out there, and start just corporatizing biases that an individual in his human capacity would not have done, and just make it part of the whole computer automated program. And you're saying, but the computer did it, so there's nothing wrong with it. It can have those biases, and that's why the ethical oversight of AI is going to be important in the future. As I said, when I do that talk about 2040, it's about, I think a lot of forensic work is going to be needed in the future, but the amount of ethical questions that we will have to ask, and where we will get involved. One of the things that I, for example, say is, and it comes back to myself, if you are still believing as financial planner that the value that you add is picking the right funds, AI has already replaced you. You are worthless. If you think that your knowledge about Section 4Q is what makes you smart, sorry, goodbye, retire, go and live or listen on your Starlink device like Greg to us somewhere in the bush. Forget about being a financial advisor. But if you understand that there's going to be a lot more difficult questions that you as a financial advisor are going to need to answer. If we look at where medical, sorry, I'm going a bit off topic, but it's important to understand this. If you start looking at where medical research and everything is going towards, you at 90 are going to be able to go through an operation that gives you another 10, 20 years, but it's going to cost you half of your family fortune. Who's going to make that decision in your family, whether you have lived long enough now at age 90, or whether you are allowed to use that 5 million to extend your life for another 10 or 20 years? So understand that the role of a financial advisor is going to change completely, and your skill set is going to be much more. I think, as he said, forensic knowledge, AI knowledge is going to be important, but psychological knowledge going forward is going to be very important. So understanding the biases that exist, we need to be able to understand them. We need to be able to see them within our automated advice. It's already a legal requirement under Section 38. We must understand the risks and the rules underpinning the algorithms. And it's important here because if you are doing a risk assessment with that algorithm and it gets it wrong, you can financially ruin your practice. If you've got a binary agreement and you're using an automated algorithm to determine the premiums on houses in Helderkruin, and it didn't pick up that you shouldn't insure my house, you are going to have an annual 20 to 50,000 claim that's very quickly can kill your binder. So be aware of the risks and the rules underpinning. Identify the risks to client arising from the automated advice. We've touched on that already. And then on a regular basis, you need to monitor and review the automated advice generated by the algorithms to ensure quality and suitability of the advice. and compliance with the Act. So it's very important that you need to have that people that actually understand how the hell this thing works. If you're sitting there and saying, "Wow, this is amazing, I don't know what it's doing," you shouldn't be using it at all. I sometimes feel like that just when I see how people use a scissors. They should probably not be using that at all. You must establish, implement, and maintain adequate policies and procedures to monitor, review, and test the advice. This is something that our advisors, and I mean, now I'm again going off topic, but I like going off topic. This is one of the big problems that I see in many of our advisor spaces. We do not properly document the processes in our practices. And when we get our audits, when we get the regulator coming in to look at what we're doing for FIC, what we're doing for FAIS, then we fail because we do not have adequate policies and procedures in place. Make sure that your RMCP, everything is in order. You must ensure that your document design and your processes and stuff is in place. You need to be able to prove how did you test this automated advice processes that you are using and decision-making processes. And then you must have adequate and sufficient technological resources to maintain client records and data integrity. We've spoken about that. Cybersecurity, extremely important when you start using this. You must protect the confidentiality and other information. And what is interesting is that because of the fact that AI can draw information from so many sources, you find that even data that has been scrubbed, that you have taken away the client's identity, AI is good enough to actually find out what the identity of that person is because of it using other sources. If you say a person that's just purchased a Ford Everest in last month, they can go and check, okay, who's 45 years old, bought a Ford Everest, and immediately they're able to go and link the name to that data. So please make sure that you use this, and it's therefore very important to meet current and anticipated operational needs. So in my mind, if you're just asking DeepSeek or ChatGPT questions, you are pretty much safe. As I touched on the beginning, just make sure that you ask the correct questions. Ensure that from your side you have the knowledge in place so that you can test the quality and the correctness of the information that you're getting. But it's pretty safe when you start going into the automated processes for claims, for risk underwriting, or for selecting your collective investment scheme, or for market analysis and stuff. Then you are starting to walk into this legal minefield that you need to ensure that you've got everything in place. So Bernard, there's another 3 or 4 minutes left for Q&A before we close down. I don't know if there's anything that's come in.
Thank you so much, Ronald. I am checking the Q&A. We did touch on the ethical one. I'm seeing one new come in. On the point of section 72 of POPIA, it states that personal info may only be transferred to foreign country only if the receiving country have laws in place to protect personal information. Am I correct to conclude that this type of legal check has to be done with any type of tech software used? For example, a simple email software like Google or Microsoft has access to email addresses, and therefore those countries have to be legal checked. So Ronald, if you wanted to comment on that from Adrian, thank you.
It is a major problem, yes. It is actually 100% the situation. Any of that data, you need to go through that check. I do believe that when you're using Microsoft, they do comply with most of with all of those requirements. I know our team has been working on that.
Interesting.
So yes, it is applicable to everyone.
Very interesting. Thank you for that, Ronald. I do see we have 3 minutes. No more questions that I'm seeing popping in right now, Mr. King. So I'd like to take this opportunity then to start wrapping up. I just wanted to mention, you mentioned earlier, you're going to be the cold water on top of Peter Olliott's fire. And when you started off with all these policies and documents, I did feel like the cold water was thrown on me. But I am a man that believes in balance in life and everything. And your closing remarks were on point for me, where you said, go and play with it, but don't necessarily upload your ID document to a free version. Don't go insert all your client's data into the first time you're using it. So I thought that was very valuable, but definitely not cold water, Mr. King, is what I was trying to say. Definitely valuable insights in terms of how to protect yourself while keeping, up to date with what's happening in the market. So from our side, I will leave a minute for you to give any closing remarks. But I just like to say thank you to you as well as Rob and Peter for your presentations. And then, of course, to the team in the back end, to Lani, Brad, Sandra, all working hard to make sure this thing flows smoothly, making us look good. And most importantly, our members for joining us this morning. Thank you. I'm very sure that you did learn something new. I hope you're going to play with the tech, but play with it responsibly, as Mr. King said. And don't get into any trouble. But let's keep ahead of the curve. We definitely cannot be kept in the dark or keep ourselves in the dark anymore. The time has come to stay ahead of technology. So I'm very grateful for your time this morning. Mr. King, any closing remarks before we say goodbye to our members?
I just love the Mr. King. It makes me feel extremely old and time to be replaced by AI.
Thanks, Ronald. Appreciate your time. I will definitely remind my AI not to call you Mr. King when I prepare for another emceeing. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you, members. I don't see anything else in the Q&A. If there is, we will, of course, try and address those if possible. Thank you for your time. Hope you have an awesome morning, and we'll see you soon.